It wasn't important. I was just talking about how we're all gonna die.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Cram here, and it is time for another Albums of the Year video. Today we are looking at our favorite albums of 1998. 1998, I think, is, I don't know, in my mind, the year that rock and roll fully recedes to the background and pop just completely takes over. The biggest selling album of the year is Spice by the Spice Girls. You've also got the debut album from NSYNC. You've got the release of Britney Spears' first single. Also on September 14th, 1998, you've got the debut of TRL, which was just a massive show, especially anyone in our generation knows it very well. Top 10 countdown show on MTV hosted by Carson Daly, which kind of controlled the pop landscape for a number of years. And then, you have a number of things happening in the rock world that are, I guess, maybe be seen as like the passing of the torch or things shifting where rock becomes less relevant. You've got the release of Van Halen 3. That's not doing rock and roll any favors. You've got Dave Navarro fired from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Lollapalooza puts itself on pause until 2003 after the organizers are unable to sign a significant major headlining act. Steven Tyler breaks his knee at a concert in Anchorage, Alaska. Scott Weiland is arrested buying heroin. So a lot of just, downturn in the rock world. For me, on a personal level, 1998 is a significant year because it's the year I entered high school. And because I was playing on the high school soccer team, I didn't have time to take piano lessons anymore. So I stopped taking lessons and began using my dad's guitar and his Mel Bay books to start teaching myself how to play guitar. So 98, the year I started playing guitar, been playing for 22 years now, hard to believe. That would really just kind of take over for me, and I wouldn't play soccer in my sophomore year. It was really just all guitar and playing in my friend's garage from there on out. So 98 for you guys, what do you think?
I really hate 98. Looking back, during 98 was sort of a momentous time because I bought my first CD with my own money that year, which I'll have to discuss a little later because it sort of ties into my favorite albums of the year, but sort of started kind of noticing music for the first time in a couple of years. I sort of stopped listening to music for a while there between, 10 and 13. Still didn't care that much about anything new. Like going back, it's most of these albums I haven't really heard, I didn't hear at the time, so it's still looking back and kind of influenced by my tastes now instead of like things I grew up with, which we'll get to in a couple of years.
Yeah, 98 for me, obviously, you could argue that there's a lot of really good hip hop artists coming into the fold that are like more than modern hip hop artists for the most part, but still not my favorite hip hop artists. And hip hop, not my favorite genre. And like Jason was saying, pop kind of took over. And even that pop sound started to get into a lot of more rock artists. And then you really had like a big divide between mainstream rock and indie rock, I think, really starting to battle it out. That said, 98, a pretty thin year for stuff I liked a lot. And even a thinner year for stuff that I was familiar with, to be honest. This was year that I really had to do a good deep dive on stuff, looked at some lists, what was critically acclaimed of stuff that I missed, and even stuff that, a lot of people really like from this kind of just doesn't live up to me. Like I've never been big with Sparkle Horse or Gomez or stuff like that gets a lot of acclaim. I've got a lot of stuff that I like a lot here, and my top records are awesome, but just the number of albums that I know from 98 and 99 when we get into next week, it's like this really rough hole that I'm in where I just don't know as much as other years, probably because just maybe there isn't that much, but that's just my take. But I like the 5 that I got a lot.
What are your 5, Ryan? Are you going to start us out or do I start?
I shall start. All right, let's talk about ones that missed. TNT by Tortoise, PJ Harvey's Is This Desire, Boy with the Arab Strap by Belle and Sebastian, and A Thousand Leaves by Sonic Youth, all missing. I think people tend to think Sonic Youth is like a 80s to early 90s band, but I think I talked about Washing Machine a couple 95, and their 90 stuff is pretty darn good too, but just missed my top 5. So my runners up officially are going to be Moon Picks by Cat Power, also XO by Elliott Smith, and Adore by Smashing Pumpkins, which I think is criminally underrated. When we do the listography for Smashing Pumpkins, it's that or another album, probably my favorite Pumpkins record. So the winner, it comes down to 2. It was really tight. My runner-up is going to be Yield by Pearl Jam, but my winner is Moon Safari by Air. Air, pretty awesome band. Really sticks out, especially stuff going on during 98. This is the debut. They're a duo from Paris. It's really interesting. It's got a lot of, first off, Joe, you kind of rolled your eyes, but this is an album for keys lover. There's a lot of really good key leads and little key runs that they do. It's got kind of just like this groovy, like jazzy cafe in space kind of vibe to it. It's like got like a secret agent vibe. It's very relaxing, very slow moving and methodical. And the songs are all really different from each other, but it's still got a really nice connectivity to it. The Femme Déjante, the lead off track, doesn't sound really anything like Sexy Boy, which comes right after. It's a very musical album, not a ton of songwriting from a traditional pop rock standpoint, not a lot of vocals compared to other albums, especially that I have as my winners. But this is an album that I love their whole catalog. I don't know where this falls in it, but it's really interesting. Like I said, it's got like this really nice, just, it's hard to explain because it's got a lot of rhythm to it. It's got a lot of bass to it, almost like no electric guitar, synth and keys. And just the mood is just very sedating and just kind of sounds like someone, we kind of used this when we talked about OK Computer. It sounds like someone from another planet trying to do like smooth jazz a little bit, but not really understanding what it is to be a human being. It's really cool and definitely worth a listen if you're not familiar with it. So just edging out Yield by Pearl Jam is Moon Safari by Air, which you might not have saw coming, boys.
I saw it.
Yeah, I kind of saw that coming. Well, 1998, I think this year bites. I mean, I started listening to modern music in this year after, I mean, I have no, there's not a single album in 1997 I don't think that I heard until 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. It came much after the actual year. 98 kind of, you know, there's albums I remember listening to, like Miseducation, Lauryn Hill, and Yield, a couple others. So I was dabbling in music, and I kind of see why I didn't like modern music at the time, because there's not a lot here for me. I had to really kind of search, even to find 5 albums that I considered. None of these would make my top million probably, but I gotta pick 5. So here we go. Coming in as sort of the runners up, I got the self-titled debut from System of a Down, which is sort of new metal, but not really. I think it stays away from that kind of cheesy Limp Bizkit style. It's pretty insane. And any other year, I don't think I'd have it on here, but it's kind of a fun listen anyway. Also making my list, I got version 2.0 by Garbage, which really good. You know, there's some really good songs on here. Maybe 2/3 of the album I really like. The other third is sort of forgettable, but we got some good hits on here, like Push It and When I Grow Up. So pretty good album from them, very much of its time. Also, I got Yield by Pearl Jam, which is pretty good. I do like Yield. I think it's a solid album. It's not my favorite Pearl Jam album, but maybe sort of start of a little bit of a downturn, but I think it's still pretty solid. I also got XO by Elliott Smith, which I like a lot. I mean, I definitely like XO. It's not, I don't know if it's my favorite Elliott Smith. We'll get to him someday, I'm sure, in our listography. But I definitely like his sort of less indie stuff than the real early stuff where it was still a little too in the indie genre. He sort of really incorporates some nice pop stuff and more orchestration on this, which I like. But my winner, and it's sort of, I feel bad picking this because I don't want to. I really didn't want to. And I'm sure Jason knows what it is. I got to go with Before These Crowded Streets by Dave Matthews Band. It kind of has to be because it was the first CD I ever bought. It was the first CD I ever wanted to own. Listening back to it now, it's a little cringy with some of the lyrics, but the musicianship is still top notch. They got Tim Reynolds to guest on all the tracks, Bella Fleck, Kronos Quartets on some songs, Alanis Morissette does some guest vocals. I'm mostly in it for the bass playing, which I think is spectacular, from Stefan Lessard. I love the sax. I love the violin. Less so Dave Matthews, but I think the album as a whole still has some really good playing, some really cool tracks on it. I really like Don't Drink the Water and Rapunzel. It's still it's a good album in my opinion. I think it's good. I don't think I'd pick it in any other year, but it's sort of by default of me really liking it for a long period of time is going to be my number one for 98. I really tried hard to find another album. I really didn't want to have Dave Matthews as my number one, but I couldn't get around it. I couldn't lie to the people and pick something else. So there you got it. Not really any runners up or any sort of almost made it at all. Just a really disappointing year.
What a weird segment. You were so apprehensive about that.
I didn't want to pick it. I had to, though.
All right. For me, I actually it sounds like I look at 98 a little more favorably than both of you do. On paper, I kind of felt like it was going to be a pretty weak year, but when I started going through and listening to some stuff, it seemed like everything was better than I expected it to be. So in the end, there was a lot of stuff that, missed out on my list that I thought was very good. Wide Swing Tremolo by Sunvolt, Dressed Up Like Nebraska by Josh Rouse. Really good Willie Nelson album called Teatro that was produced by Daniel Lanois. That's really good. Navy Blues by Sloan. Electroshock Blues by Eels. Good Morning Spider by Sparkle Horse. But the five that make my list, I've got 1965 by the Afghan Wigs. Really cool, unique record. Don't hear it talked about very often, but it's actually my favorite Afghan Wigs record. Really cool. They really let their R&B influences take over on this one. Really good stuff. Interesting, unique record. If you've not heard it, I would recommend it. I've also got Mermaid Avenue by Billy Bragg and Wilco. Really good record, taking old Woody Guthrie lyrics and putting them to song. Usually projects like that don't turn out that well, but it's a great kind of experiment. So good, in fact, that it led to multiple sequels. I've also got Yield by Pearl Jam. Actually is my favorite Pearl Jam record, spoiler. Absolutely love it. Was my first Pearl Jam record that I ever owned. I've also got XO by Elliott Smith. Fantastic. Major label debut. The bigger budget goes a long way to really just making his songs, pop. And I don't know, this is going to be maybe a surprise for a lot of people. Number one, my favorite album of 1998 is Mutations by Beck. Another record that doesn't get talked about that much, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. I got it when it first came out, and it didn't do a lot for me. At that point, I wasn't really into folk or country or really even singer-songwriter stuff that much at that point. I was really rock and roll all the way. But as I revisited it over the years, it just grew and grew and grew. It took a long time, probably a decade or more, before it really sunk in how great I thought it was. But it's excellent. I probably at this point like it more than Odelay even. I think it's one of his best records. And no one ever talks about it, but I think Beck is a fantastic singer. And when he has these more straightforward type of songs and just lets his voice do the work, I think it's incredible. Great songs on here. The production's really cool. Kind of, buried between a couple classic albums, so people kind of skim over this one, I think. But it's great. If you don't know it, check it out. Mutations by Beck.
Yeah, I think I forgot to listen to that one. Maybe I'll listen after this show, and maybe it can become my number one.
It's definitely better than Dave Matthews.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But again, like another one of these artists from this time period that I should like a lot more than I do is Beck, and like I like him fine, but I've never Beck, Sparkle Horse, all those all country bands, and like Sloan. I've never understood your fascination with Sloan. I think they're fine, but and I'm kind of surprised Joe didn't have that Afghan Wigs album. I feel like if you knew it, you would like it a good bit, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I guess I have some exploring to do in 1998. I will say, by far the best album of 1998 was ineligible for my top prize, but it is in fact the Godzilla soundtrack. It is amazing. It has original song from Silverchair, Ben Folds 5, one of Rage Against the Machine's best songs. Other than the cheesy Puff Daddy Jimmy Page remake of Kashmir, the rest of the album is phenomenal, and it would be by far my number one if it was eligible, but afraid it is not. There's a disclaimer for you, so if anybody asks, it's that album and not Before These Crowded Streets. Thank you.
Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. Check down in the description for links to all of our social media accounts, and we will be back next week with 1999.